After decades of dreaming, I finally bought my little Cape Cod cottage. But before I could even unpack, my daughter-in-law called, announcing 22 guests were arriving tomorrow for a party she planned in my new two-bedroom home. When she used my son's career against me, I simply agreed. A quiet smile spread across my face. She has no idea what's waiting for them. Get ready to dive into this chilling tale. Like, share, and tell us where you're listening from. The salty air hit Eleanor Vance like a soothing balm the moment she stepped out of her ancient sedan. At 67, her bones knew the ache of long journeys, but today, that familiar weariness was overridden by a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. Before her stood her Cape Cod cottage, modest yet utterly perfect, perched on a gentle rise overlooking the restless Atlantic. The panoramic view was a living painting, vast, untamed oceans stretching to the horizon, waves crashing rhythmically against the shore, a symphony of power and peace. This wasn't just a house, it was a testament, a monument to a dream fiercely held and hard-won. 8 years since Arthur, her ex-husband, had scoffed at her whispered wish for a beach house. Eleanor, you're not the type for sand between your toes. Stick to the garden club. His words, laced with dismissive contempt, still echoed faintly in her memory, but now they only sweetened her victory. For 8 years, she'd worked two jobs, a weary retail manager by day, a meticulous bookkeeper by night. No vacations, no frivolous spending, just an unwavering focus on this singular goal. Every extra dollar saved was a tiny brick laid in the foundation of this very cottage. She ran a hand over the weathered shingles, feeling the tangible reality of her sacrifice. She imagined Daniel, her son, and his wife, Charlotte Sterling, arriving tomorrow morning, as promised, to help her unpack. A faint ripple of apprehension, cold and quick, ran through her. Charlotte, so sophisticated, so effortlessly dismissive. Eleanor often felt like a dusty antique in her presence, admired maybe, but ultimately irrelevant. She sighed, pushing the thought away. Tomorrow would be for unpacking, for settling into the quiet rhythm of her new life. The shrill ring of her phone shattered the stillness. It wasn't Daniel. It was Charlotte. Eleanor, darling, so glad I caught you. I know you just got in. Charlotte's voice, a polished instrument of command, offered no apology for the intrusion. Listen, big change of plans for tomorrow. Daniel and I won't be able to help you move, darling. Something much more pressing has come up. Eleanor's heart sank a little. Oh, what is it, dear? Well, you know Daniel's had been trying to land the Albright account for months, don't you? Crucial for his career. And they just happened to be in the area, so I took the initiative. I've invited them and a few other key clients and their spouses for a celebratory weekend. A celebratory weekend? Eleanor frowned. Charlotte, that's wonderful for Daniel, but a celebratory weekend where? A pause, almost imperceptible. Then Charlotte's bright, unyielding tone returned. Why, at your new place, darling. Where else? It's the perfect setting. A brand new home by the ocean. Such a charming backdrop. We'll be there bright and early tomorrow, around 11. There are about 22 of us in total. The numbers hit Eleanor like a physical blow. 22 in her two-bedroom cottage, before she'd even had a chance to put a single teacup in the cupboard. The sheer audacity took her breath away. 22 people? Charlotte, that's not possible. The house only has 2 bedrooms, and it's completely empty. I literally just arrived. Charlotte's laugh tinkled, devoid of genuine amusement. Don't be dramatic, Eleanor. People can sleep on air mattresses, on sofas, on the floor if they have to. It's a party, a spontaneous, fabulous party. Besides, you wouldn't want to spoil this opportunity for your son, would you? Daniel's career, Eleanor, this is vital. The familiar sting of manipulation, the casual dismissal of her feelings, the blatant emotional blackmail, it all washed over Eleanor. For decades, she'd played the accommodating mother, the agreeable wife, the woman who always made it work. But something shifted inside her then, as she looked out at the churning ocean, at the cottage that was hers truly and completely, for the first time. The old urge to simply concede, to swallow the indignity, flickered then died, replaced by a cold, steely resolve she hadn't known she possessed. Of course, Charlotte, Eleanor said, her voice unnervingly calm, a quiet current running beneath the words. I'll make sure everything is ready for your arrival. Absolutely everything. A quiet smile, thin and chilling, spread across Eleanor's face as Charlotte continued to rattle off details. But not quite the way you're expecting, Charlotte. Oh, not quite at all. The last vestiges of the Cape Cod sunset bled across the sky, painting the ocean in hues of violet and deep rose. Eleanor Vance, perched in her new window seat, a worn legal pad resting on her knees, watched it all. The ocean's vastness, once a balm, now felt like a mirror to the expansive task before her. Charlotte's audacity, Daniel's passive complicity, it all converged into a single, undeniable challenge. This wasn't just about a weekend party. It was about reclaiming her space, her dignity, and perhaps a small slice of her son. The quiet, simmering anger that had replaced her initial shock was a fuel she hadn't realized she possessed. Decades spent in the hushed, methodical world of libraries had honed Eleanor into an expert in research, organization, and, perhaps most importantly, understanding the subtle currents of human nature. Information was power, and Eleanor knew precisely how to unearth it. She picked up her phone, her fingers finding Daniel's number. "Mom, you all right?" Daniel's voice, a familiar mix of warmth and underlying anxiety, came through. "I'm fine, dear, just a little surprised by Charlotte's plans for tomorrow." Eleanor kept her voice even, devoid of accusation. Daniel sighed. "Yeah, I know. I'm really sorry, Mom. It was all so sudden. Charlotte she gets these ideas. The Albrights are really important for my firm, you know. And when she saw the opportunity, she just ran with it." His explanation trailed off, a familiar pattern of deferring blame to his wife, a peacemaker at his core. "So she didn't consult me or you before inviting 22 people to my empty two-bedroom home for the weekend?" Eleanor asked gently, not as a question, but as a confirmation of Charlotte's unilateral declaration. Another sigh. "No, Mom, not really. But look, it's just for a couple of days. We can make it work, right?" "We'll make it work, Daniel," Eleanor affirmed, a subtle edge to her tone that he, in his eagerness for reassurance, likely missed. "Tell me, who exactly is coming? You mentioned the Albrights. Anyone else I should know about?" Daniel, relieved, launched into the guest list. "Well, of course, the Albrights, Mr. and Ms. Marcus Albright. Then Charlotte's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. Her sister Isabel and her husband Marcus will be there. And some of Daniel's senior partners from the firm, and a few of Charlotte's close friends from her charity board." It was an extensive roster, a veritable who's who of Charlotte's influential social circle. Eleanor listened patiently, jotting down every name on her pad. "Right. Don't worry, darling. I'll handle everything. You just focus on your clients." She ended the call, a faint pang of understanding for her son's innate desire for peace, even at his own mother's expense. But that understanding didn't soften her resolve. Her laptop hummed to life. Eleanor, a woman who preferred the quiet rustle of pages, was surprisingly adept with technology, a skill acquired out of necessity during her tenure as head librarian. She began to compile her dossiers. Each name from Daniel's list became a search query. LinkedIn, local news archives, society pages, even niche industry publications. She wasn't looking for gossip. She was looking for patterns, preferences, vulnerabilities. The Sterlings, Charlotte's parents, owned a prominent high-end furniture chain. Eleanor noted their reputation for exquisite taste and meticulous attention to detail, a fastidiousness that bordered on obsession when it came to their surroundings. Isabel and Marcus, Charlotte's sister and brother-in-law, ran a high-profile celebrity crisis management firm. Image, discretion, and control were their lifeblood. The Albrights, the crown jewels of Daniel's client list, were third-generation luxury real estate developers, renowned for their opulent, exclusive properties and a discerning appreciation for carefully curated experiences. They expected perfection, an aesthetic that spoke of understated wealth and impeccable hospitality. By 11 p.m., the soft glow of her laptop illuminated Eleanor's face, casting shadows in the quiet cottage. She had a comprehensive understanding of her unwelcome guests. Their expectations were sky high, their tolerance for inconvenience non-existent, and their careers built on maintaining an illusion of effortless perfection. Phase one of her plan began. Her first call was to Rosemary Jenkins, her oldest friend, a woman whose loyalty was as unshakable as a granite seawall. Rosemary answered on the second ring, her voice raspy with sleep. Eleanor explained calmly and succinctly. Rosemary, she concluded, I need a few favors, big ones. Rosemary didn't hesitate. Name it, Eleanor. Anything for you. Before midnight, Eleanor had made 7 strategic calls and sent 12 meticulously worded emails. She wasn't just calling friends. She was activating a network, a quiet army of local contacts cultivated over years of community involvement, of potlucks organized, historical societies revitalized, and countless books recommended. The local plumber, the eccentric antique dealer, the quiet fisherman who knew the hidden coves, the owner of the small, quirky gift shop, even the lady who ran the B&B down the road. Each had a unique skill, a specific resource, a debt of gratitude, or simply a fondness for the underestimated Eleanor Vance. As the moon cast its silver light over the ocean, Eleanor closed her laptop, a faint, contented smile playing on her lips. She had been underestimated her entire life, dismissed as just a librarian, just Arthur's wife, just Daniel's mother. Tonight, she was the orchestrator, the architect of a very particular kind of hospitality. She slept soundly, confident in the power of a woman underestimated. The first sliver of dawn painted the horizon as Eleanor Vance rose from her bed at 6:00 a.m. There was no lingering grogginess, only a sharp, exhilarating clarity. She felt refreshed, focused, and utterly in control. A quick shower, a strong cup of coffee, and she was out the door, her old sedan purring to life as she headed for the small town center. Her first stop was Greta's Market, a local institution. Ingrid Olsen, the owner, a woman with a kind face and a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted Eleanor with a warm smile. Eleanor, all set for your guests? Ingrid's eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. The special order for the welcome refreshments is ready, and the deliveries for the various lodgings have been confirmed. Eleanor's past efforts in securing a college scholarship for Ingrid's bright grandson were not forgotten. When Eleanor reached for her wallet, Ingrid waved her off. Consider it a small thank you, dear. Good luck today. Next, Eleanor pulled up to Coastal Rentals, a small, unassuming establishment that dealt in everything from kayaks to air mattresses. Thomas Miller, a grizzled man with a permanent smirk, was waiting. Morning, Eleanor. The special requests are all arranged. This is going to be a good one, eh? He winked, clearly relishing the impending disruption. Eleanor just smiled, a silent conspirator. By 10:00 a.m., Eleanor had completed her circuit, visiting 7 local businesses, confirming every detail, every special arrangement. She secured everything needed for her peculiar welcome. Back at her cottage, she moved with quiet efficiency, placing fresh-cut wildflowers in a simple vase on the kitchen table and making up the one guest room with crisp white linens. Her own room, the master suite with the best view, she left untouched. At 11:30 a.m., dressed in a simple, elegant blue sundress, Eleanor stepped onto her porch. The sea breeze ruffled her hair, and she looked out at the winding coastal road. A quiet sense of anticipation hummed within her. She radiated a calm, welcoming demeanor, the perfect picture of a gracious host. Soon a caravan of luxury SUVs and sleek sedans snaked its way up her driveway. The procession was a testament to the wealth and influence of Charlotte's circle. The first vehicle, a gleaming black Mercedes, pulled up, and Charlotte Sterling emerged, resplendent in designer linen, her eyes immediately sweeping over the cottage. "Eleanor, darling," she trilled, air-kissing Eleanor's cheek. Her gaze was already assessing, dissecting. "This is so quaint. Smaller than I expected, but still, very charming for a beach house, I suppose." The unspoken "for your beach house" hung in the air. Daniel, looking slightly harried in a crisp suit, quickly enveloped Eleanor in a genuine hug. "Mom, I'm so sorry about all the last-minute changes. You know Charlotte," he murmured, his eyes apologetic. Eleanor just patted his arm, her smile warm. "Don't you worry, dear. I'm just so proud of you and all your success." Charlotte, oblivious to their brief exchange, began introductions, her voice carrying over the sounds of car doors closing and luggage being unloaded. Everyone, this is Eleanor Vance, Daniel's mother, and our wonderful host. She gestured grandly. And Eleanor, these are our esteemed guests, Mr. and Mrs. Jonathan and Diana Albright, she said, ushering forward a distinguished, impeccably dressed couple who looked like they'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. And my darling parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, my sister Isabel and her husband Marcus, Daniel's colleagues, Charles and Fiona, and their spouses, and my wonderful assistant Chloe, who's been a lifesaver. 22 faces, some expectant, some faintly bored, some openly curious, gazed at Eleanor. "Welcome, everyone," Eleanor said, her voice clear and caring. "Please come inside for a light welcome refreshment before we get settled." She led the way into her living room, a space designed for intimacy, not an assembly. It could comfortably seat 8, perhaps 10 at a squeeze. 22 people shuffled in, an awkward tableau of jostling shoulders and forced smiles. Mrs. Sterling, Charlotte's mother, surveyed the cramped space. "It's so cozy," she commented, the word dripping with barely concealed disdain. Jonathan Albright, ever the practical one, inquired politely, "Wonderful. But Eleanor, where shall we put our luggage? It seems we've brought quite a bit." Eleanor smiled, a serene, almost beatific expression. "Oh, don't you worry about that, Mr. Albright. I've made some special arrangements." She poured lemonade into a collection of mismatched glasses she'd collected over the years, some chipped, some plain, all charmingly informal. She offered a plate of simple oatmeal raisin cookies. "Due to the cottage's intimate size," she continued, her voice pleasant and unhurried, "I've arranged for alternative accommodations around town. I thought it best to ensure everyone has a comfortable private space." Charlotte's bright smile faltered, her expression shifting from polite confusion to dawning alarm. "Eleanor, darling, that wasn't necessary. We discussed this. Air mattresses, remember?" "Oh, but Charlotte, it most certainly was necessary," Eleanor insisted, her tone unwavering. She retrieved a stack of neatly sealed envelopes from a basket. "I wanted everyone to be perfectly comfortable." She began distributing them, calling out names. Mr. and Mrs. Albright, Jonathan and Diana opened theirs simultaneously. Diana's aristocratic brow furrowed. "The Harborview Motel? For me? And the Seabreeze Inn for Jonathan? They're separate? And these are—" She trailed off, glancing at the stark, motel-style font on the printout. Jonathan Albright's lips thinned. The Sterlings received their envelopes next, only to discover they were booked into separate rooms in neighboring towns, one above a noisy diner, the other described as quaintly rustic. Isabel and Marcus, the crisis managers, found themselves assigned to a local campground. "Largely resolved raccoon problem," Isabel read aloud, her voice tight with disbelief before quickly stifling a gasp. Daniel's colleagues received bookings at a youth hostel, a rustic, uninsulated cottage, and one particularly unfortunate soul, a room above a local bait shop, complete with a disclaimer about occasional pungent aromas. Daniel looked increasingly uncomfortable, shifting his weight. Charlotte, her face pale with fury, hissed, "This is unacceptable, Eleanor. The Albrights cannot stay at a roadside motel." Eleanor merely tilted her head. "Oh dear, well, I assumed you'd prefer your guests to have their own rooms rather than sleep on my living room floor. But if you'd like, Daniel and Charlotte, you can certainly have my guest room. And Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, you are welcome to my bedroom. I'm perfectly happy with the sofa." Diana Albright, a woman clearly accustomed to dictating her own terms, cleared her throat. "Perhaps it's best if we simply return to Boston, Jonathan." Charlotte's head snapped up. "No, Mrs. Albright, please. We have an exclusive dinner reservation at the Coastal Club tonight. I spent weeks securing it." Eleanor's smile widened, a hint of steel in her eyes. "Oh, that's right, the Coastal Club. I thought I'd be helpful and confirm it for you this morning. My old friend Marcel, the manager there, informed me they're unfortunately fully booked tonight for a private event. A large wedding rehearsal, I believe." She paused, letting the implication sink in. "But not to worry. I've managed to secure a lovely group reservation for everyone at the Salty Dog. It's a wonderful local spot, very authentic. Plenty of picnic tables, right on the water. They do a particularly excellent pickled herring buffet. And no alcohol, of course. A healthy choice. Jonathan Albright exchanged a subtle, almost imperceptible glance with his sompre. For the first time, Diana's perfectly composed features showed a faint trace of something that looked remarkably like amused respect. Phase 1 was complete. With the lodging crisis temporarily and deliberately diffused, Eleanor, ever the gracious host, suggested a stroll down to her private beach. The path, narrow and slightly overgrown, proved a challenge for the procession of city dwellers in their expensive shoes. Eleanor, however, navigated it with ease, her sundress fluttering in the salty breeze. As they reached the pebbled shore, Eleanor launched into an impromptu, meticulously detailed, yet utterly boring lecture on local marine biology. And here you see, she enthused, pointing with a long, slender finger at a half-buried, washed-up horseshoe crab shell, a true living fossil. These incredible creatures have been around for over 450 million years, predating the dinosaurs. They're not true crabs at all, you know. They're actually more closely related to spiders and scorpions. She looked up, her gaze bright and expectant, at Isabel Sterling, Charlotte's sister, who had carefully picked her way down the path in pristine designer sandals. "Isabel, darling, wouldn't you like to hold it? Feel its ancient carapace?" Isabel recoiled instantly, a subtle shudder running through her. Her pristine sandals, designed for yacht decks, not wet sand, sank slightly. "Oh, no, thank you, Eleanor," she managed, her voice strained. "I'm terribly squeamish with anything that crawls." Mr. and Mrs. Albright, trapped by their own good manners, made a valiant effort to appear interested, nodding politely as Eleanor expounded on the intricacies of the creature's respiratory system. Diana's elegant linen pants, however, were steadily collecting sand and dampness, while Jonathan, with increasing frequency, subtly checked his Patek Philippe watch. Charlotte, meanwhile, paced the shoreline, her agitation growing with each passing minute, her phone pressed to her ear as she desperately searched for a signal. "Having trouble, dear?" Eleanor asked, her voice laced with mock concern. "Oh, cell service can be so spotty here. I've found the only truly reliable spot is near the sewage treatment facility, about a mile north. Lovely views, too." Charlotte's jaw tightened. After what felt like an eternity, a full 30 minutes of Eleanor's impromptu nature lecture, ranging from the migratory patterns of local shorebirds to the surprising edibility of certain seaweeds, a collective sigh of visible relief went through the group when Eleanor finally suggested returning to the cottage for an early afternoon tea. Back at the cottage, Eleanor had arranged an elegant tea service that, at first glance, was quite impressive. Delicate porcelain cups, a tiered stand laden with dainty finger sandwiches and perfectly golden scones, all presented with an air of refined hospitality. But beneath the surface lay a carefully concocted culinary surprise. Diana Albright, ever the picture of grace, took a delicate bite of a cucumber sandwich. Her expression, usually unreadable, subtly shifted to one of dismay. "Eleanor, this is an unusual flavor," she commented politely. Eleanor beamed. "Oh, I'm so glad you noticed, Diana. It's my special homemade seaweed butter. And these lovely scones? They're infused with dried dulse, a wonderfully nutritious local sea vegetable. Very authentic coastal living." One by one, guests sampled the offerings, each registering a subtle yet unmistakable discomfort at the deliberately unusual flavors. A few managed strained smiles, others visibly suppressed shudders. The tea itself, served from a rustic pot, had a distinct, almost savory note. Daniel hesitantly took a sip. "Mom, this tea is unique." Eleanor's smile never wavered. "And it's a special blend, inspired by the robust traditions of remote Scandinavian fishing villages. Very healthful, lots of natural minerals." By mid-afternoon, the initial excitement and forced enthusiasm of the impromptu celebration had evaporated entirely. It was replaced by a dawning realization among the guests that this weekend was not going to be the curated luxury experience Charlotte had promised. Discomfort was settling in like the evening fog. Charlotte, her face a mask of barely contained fury, finally cornered Eleanor in the cramped kitchen, abandoning all pretense. What exactly do you think you're doing? She hissed, her voice low and venomous. Everything is wrong. The accommodations, the food, the ruined dinner reservation. You're making a fool of me. Eleanor maintained an expression of innocent confusion, her eyes wide. I'm being a good hostess, of course, Charlotte. I'm simply doing my best to offer a genuine, authentic Cape Cod experience. Is something wrong? You're sabotaging my event, Charlotte accused, her voice rising slightly. Eleanor met her gaze steadily, her serene smile unwavering. I'm simply working with what I have, Charlotte, just as I've always done when faced with other people's expectations. You made the arrangements, dear. I'm just fulfilling them to the best of my ability. At that moment, Daniel entered the kitchen, his brow furrowed with concern. Mom, Charlotte, what's going on? Charlotte whirled around. Your mother is deliberately ruining everything, Daniel. The Coastal Club reservation, it's just gone. And she's booked us into some awful place called the Salty Dog. Eleanor, ever helpful, chimed in. Oh yes, the Salty Dog. I confirmed it. It's lovely, really, very rustic. And as I mentioned it, they only offer a pickled herring buffet. And the owner, bless his heart, is a man of very strong religious convictions, so they don't serve alcohol. Not a drop. The last detail was, of course, a deliberate fabrication, designed to sting Charlotte and her high-flying guests. Charlotte let out an exasperated gasp. I need some air. She declared, stalking out of the cottage, slamming the screen door behind her. Daniel turned to Eleanor, his troubled gaze searching hers. Mom, what's really going on? This isn't like you. Eleanor gently placed a hand on his arm. Oh, but Daniel, it is exactly like me. I'm finally allowing people to experience the consequences of their actions, including you, sweetheart. Her voice softened, a hint of ancient hurt in her eyes. You let this happen. You always let Charlotte dictate everything. Just observe, Daniel. Observe how quickly Charlotte's carefully orchestrated impression falls apart when she's not in complete control. Observe who truly exhibits grace under pressure and who crumbles. Eleanor picked up a fresh tray of her seaweed sandwiches, her serene smile and unshaken resolve indicating that many more lessons were yet to come. As the evening shadows lengthened across the Cape, the parade of luxury vehicles slowly dispersed from Eleanor's driveway. Each departure was marked by thinly veiled displeasure, a curt nod, a forced smile, or a mumbled excuse about needing to settle in. Eleanor stood on her porch, radiating cheerful hospitality, waving them off. Don't forget, she called out brightly to one departing couple. The Salty Dog accepts cash only for dinner. Finally, only Daniel, Charlotte, and the Albrights remained. The moment the last car disappeared over the rise, Charlotte rounded on Eleanor, her professional composure finally cracking like fragile china. Her face was flushed, her eyes narrowed to slits. I don't know what game you're playing, Eleanor, she spat, her voice a low, furious hiss, but you are embarrassing Daniel in front of the most important clients of his career. Do you have any idea how much this account means? Eleanor met her gaze, unflinching. On the contrary, Charlotte, she replied, her voice calm and measured. I believe you embarrassed Daniel. You overpromised an experience you couldn't deliver based on presumptions about my home, my resources, and my willingness. You presumed I would simply fall in line as always. Daniel, his face pale and drawn, stepped between them. Mom, Charlotte, please. The Albrights are still inside. They'll hear you. Eleanor merely tilted her head. Perhaps they should. The Albrights, she stated quietly, her gaze holding Charlotte's, are currently reconsidering whether they want to do business with a firm whose representatives would treat family this way and whose promises are so easily broken. Inside, the living room felt oddly spacious now. Eleanor turned to Mr. and Mrs. Albright, her expression warm. Please make yourselves comfortable. I have a bottle of local cranberry wine. It doesn't taste at all like the seaweed tea, I promise. Diana Albright, to Eleanor's quiet satisfaction, let out a genuine, unforced laugh, a rich, melodic sound that filled the room. Jonathan Albright, leaning back on the worn sofa, surveyed the modest yet inviting space. This is a charming home, Eleanor, he said, his voice thoughtful. And hearing about your 8-year journey to acquire it, impressive. Independence is truly undervalued these days. His gaze held a depth that Charlotte often missed, focused as she was on external markers of success. Just then, Daniel and Charlotte entered, their faces etched with strained smiles, desperately attempting to salvage the rapidly deteriorating situation. Daniel, ever the conciliator, immediately stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Albright, I am so terribly sorry for the mix-up with the accommodations. I'm sure I can find something much more suitable for you right away." He reached for his phone, already envisioning a frantic search for any available luxury suite within a 50-mile radius. Jonathan Albright waved a dismissive hand. "Don't trouble yourself, Daniel. Honestly, sometimes the most memorable experiences come from unexpected circumstances. Wouldn't you agree, Diana?" Diana nodded, a faint knowing smile playing on her lips. "I find this whole situation rather refreshing, actually. When was the last time any of us had a genuine experience rather than the same carefully curated luxury we encounter every day? Eleanor, you've certainly shaken things up." Her gaze met Eleanor's, a spark of shared understanding passing between them. Eleanor observed them, noting how the Albrights, who had built their own empire from nothing, seemed to resonate more with her hard-won authenticity than with Charlotte's polished, yet hollow, curated luxury. Charlotte, seizing on the conversational lull, attempted to steer them back to the dinner plans. "Well, at least we have the salty dog. It's a place." Diana Albright, however, cut her off smoothly. "The salty dog sounds perfect, Charlotte. Actually, I have some Swedish heritage, and I simply adore pickled herring." She gave Eleanor another subtle, knowing wink. Eleanor, catching Daniel's worried glance, then subtly advised him. "Daniel, dear, perhaps you should just give the salty dog a quick call to confirm the details for our reservation, just to be absolutely sure." Daniel, relieved to have a concrete task, grabbed his phone and stepped outside. He returned a few minutes later, looking confused but undeniably relieved. "Mom, the salty dog isn't quite what you described. No pickled herring, they have a full bar, and they're actually known for their incredible fresh lobster." Eleanor's smile was serene. "Oh, did I say pickled herring? My mistake, dear. My memory isn't what it used to be, and no alcohol? How silly of me." During the short drive to the harbor, Charlotte tried repeatedly to discuss business with the Albrights, attempting to regain control of the narrative. But to her growing frustration, the Albrights consistently turned their attention back to Eleanor, engaging her in conversation about her life, her journey to the cottage, and her experiences as a librarian. They seemed genuinely captivated by her quiet strength. The salty dog, when they arrived, was indeed a revelation. It was an elegantly rustic seafood restaurant, warm and inviting, with exposed beams and views of the moonlit harbor. Far from Eleanor's description of picnic tables and a herring buffet, it exuded a casual sophistication. Liam Jenkins, Rosemary's son, the restaurant manager, greeted Eleanor with a warm embrace. "Eleanor, so good to see you. Thank you again for all your help with that business loan. This place wouldn't be what it is without you." He ushered them to a prime table. Daniel watched this exchange, a flicker of something new in his eyes. He studied Eleanor with a fresh intensity, seeing her clearly for the first time in years, not just as his mother, but as a woman of quiet influence and deep connections. The other guests, arriving shortly after, were visibly relieved by the actual setting, a murmur of appreciation passing through the group. Jonathan Albright raised his glass, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "To Eleanor," he announced, his voice carrying, "and to her beautiful new home. May it bring her all the joy she deserves." Daniel, caught up in the moment, joined in the toast, his voice carrying a note of confused pride. Across the table, Eleanor caught Charlotte's gaze. In Charlotte's eyes, Eleanor saw a dawning comprehension, a chilling realization that she had not only severely underestimated her mother-in-law, but had also completely misjudged the Albrights. Eleanor merely smiled, a silent promise hanging in the air. "Wait until tomorrow's activities," her eyes seemed to say. Eleanor awoke with the sun, the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains of her own bedroom. She had, with polite but firm insistence, given the guest room to Daniel and Charlotte, claiming her own bed was perfectly comfortable. Stepping onto her small deck, a cup of real coffee, blessedly free of any marine-based infusions, in hand, she savored the peaceful solitude. The ocean stretched before her, a canvas of shifting blues and grays, its endless expanse mirroring the quiet satisfaction unfurling within her. A rustle behind her announced Daniel's arrival. He looked rumpled, his hair disheveled, a vulnerability in his posture she hadn't seen in years. He sank into the deck chair next to her, staring out at the waves. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "I'm really sorry about all of this, about Charlotte just taking over, about not asking you, about me not standing up for you." He ran a hand through his hair. "Last night, seeing you with the Albrights, how they responded to you, it was like I truly saw you for the first time in ages. I've been so wrapped up in work, in trying to keep Charlotte happy, that I forgot who you really are." Eleanor reached out, gently patting his hand. "Thank you, Daniel. That means a lot. And yes," she admitted, a hint of mischief in her eyes, "I was a little deliberate yesterday. That seaweed tea was truly terrible." She chuckled softly. "But I spent too many years, sweetheart, being invisible, being the quiet, accommodating woman. I won't anymore. This cottage, this life, it's mine. And if someone tries to march in and claim it without asking, they'll discover it comes with some unique features." She leaned closer, her voice conspiratorial. "My little secret, Daniel. All those years as a librarian, you get to know everyone in town, and everyone at some point needs a librarian. A little research, a little help finding something, a good book recommendation. And sometimes everyone owes you a favor or two." Daniel looked at her, a dawning realization in his eyes, a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. "So," Eleanor continued, her tone serious now, "what happens next, Daniel? What happens next time Charlotte makes plans that don't consider my feelings or my boundaries? Will you speak up then?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Mom, it's hard with Charlotte. She's so forceful." Eleanor's gaze softened. "I know she is, but remember who you really are, Daniel. My sensitive ba who used to devour books under the covers, who wrote poetry about the ocean. Don't let her define you. Don't let her define me." Just then the screen door slammed. Charlotte emerged, impeccably dressed in resort wear, but her expression was anything but serene. "Eleanor, honestly, this is a disaster. Half the group wants to leave already, and the Sterlings are furious about their motel rooms. And the Albrights are being strangely non-committal about their schedule. What exactly are your plans for the day?" Her voice was tight with barely concealed rage. Eleanor remained calm, taking a slow sip of her coffee. "Good morning, Charlotte. Well, I've planned a delightful day of authentic coastal experiences. We have a 10 a.m. whale-watching expedition, followed by a lovely picnic lunch on the boat." Charlotte stared at her, utterly incredulous. "Whale-watching? Eleanor, the Albrights are not going whale-watching. They're important clients, not tourists." "Oh, but Jonathan seemed quite enthusiastic last week when I mentioned it," Eleanor said mildly, recalling a brief, pleasant chat during dinner. "He said he hadn't been whale-watching since he was a boy." Charlotte threw her hands up in exasperation. "And what about dinner? Are we going back to the Salty Dog and their lobster?" "No, dear, I thought we'd continue with our authentic experience," Eleanor replied, her eyes twinkling. "Tonight, a proper Cape Cod bonfire on the beach with some hearty homemade chili. Very rustic, very charming." Charlotte looked utterly horrified. "A bonfire? Chili? Eleanor, these are not the activities one does with high-profile clients." To Charlotte's utter surprise, Daniel spoke up. "You know, a bonfire actually sounds great. I remember you used to make the best chili, Mom, and we'd roast marshmallows on the beach. That sounds nice." He looked at Eleanor, a genuine nostalgic smile on his face. Charlotte glared at him, then let out an exasperated huff. "I cannot believe this," she muttered, turning on her heel and stalking back into the house, likely to make 100 frantic, unanswerable phone calls. Eleanor turned back to Daniel, her eyes still holding that mischievous spark. "You know, Daniel, April is known for particularly choppy waters off the Cape. The seasickness rate on those whale-watching boats can be nearly 60%. Daniel looked at her, then back at the house where Charlotte had disappeared. A slow smile spread across his face, and then he let out a laugh, a free, genuine sound Eleanor hadn't heard from him in years. The Dolphin Fleet whale watch boat, the Sea Star, bobbed gently at the pier, an innocent prelude to the day's events. Eleanor, arriving early, exchanged a knowing glance with Captain Ben an old friend from her early days on the Cape. Make it educational, Ben, she murmured, a glint in her eye, but also eventful. Captain Ben, a man with a booming laugh and a deep understanding of Eleanor's quiet power, merely winked. The Albrights were the first to arrive, surprisingly enthusiastic and dressed practically for the brisk weather. Daniel, to Eleanor's quiet approval, was relaxed in jeans and a windbreaker. Charlotte, however, swept onto the pier in an impeccably styled nautical-themed outfit, complete with a wide-brimmed straw hat and oversized sunglasses, clearly aiming for a photo shoot on the high seas aesthetic. Captain Ben, his voice hearty, welcomed them aboard. All right, folks, welcome to the Sea Star. We've got some strong winds out there today, and the seas are a bit choppy. Got a system moving in that's going to make things nice and lively. Charlotte's perfectly made-up complexion already began to take on a faint greenish tinge. And before we set sail, Captain Ben continued, gesturing towards Eleanor, I'd like to introduce a very special guest naturalist we have with us today. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Eleanor Vance, who specializes in cetacean behavior and conservation. A stunned silence fell over the group. Charlotte's jaw actually dropped. Eleanor, however, stepped forward with the confident air of a seasoned university lecturer, completely owning the magnificent fabrication. As the Sea Star pulled away from the pier and began to pitch violently, Eleanor launched into a 20-minute presentation on the less appealing aspects of whale biology. Her topics included parasitic infestations, the gruesome process of blubber decomposition, and the peculiar digestive habits of various marine mammals. Within 10 minutes, 3 of Daniel's colleagues had retreated below deck, looking distinctly unwell. Isabel Sterling, Charlotte's sister, clung to the railing, her face pale, her eyes squeezed shut. Charlotte herself was unmistakably green, her nautical hat askew. Just as the boat hit a particularly large swell, sending a spray of icy water over the deck, Eleanor cheerfully announced, "Time for our picnic lunch." She presented a tray laden with tuna salad sandwiches, which by design had been left slightly too long in the sun, making the extra mayonnaise even more unappealing, several pungent hard-boiled eggs, and a heavy, dense cream bread pudding. The combination served during the boat's roughest patch proved to be the final straw for several passengers. Diana Albright, however, merely observed Eleanor, a trace of genuine amusement in her eyes. "Eleanor," she remarked, "you truly contain multitudes." Eleanor smiled conspiratorially. "Oh, you simply haven't heard my lecture on the microbiome of the humpback whale yet, Diana." Jonathan Albright and Daniel, surprisingly resilient, remained engrossed in conversation near the stern, seemingly unaffected by the rough seas or the culinary offerings. Charlotte, having reached her limit, had disappeared entirely below deck. Captain Ben, with a practiced theatrical sulke, announced, "All right, folks, we're at the seasickness surrender point. We've seen a few distant blows, but the main pod is about 3 miles farther out, right in the choppiest part of the bay. Let's go for it," Jonathan Albright declared, his voice booming with enthusiasm. Eleanor subtly nodded to Captain Ben, who, with a barely perceptible grin, executed a particularly violent turn of the boat, sending several more guests lurching dramatically. Eleanor, ever the professional, interjected perfectly. "Actually, Captain, I'm detecting early signs of Maldier interactive syndrome among our passengers. Perhaps it would be best to head back." Her guests, desperate for solid ground, desperately agreed. Captain Ben feigned disappointment. "Ah, what a shame. We'll miss the feeding frenzy. And the sight of those magnificent whales regurgitating partially digested krill is truly a spectacle." More groans from the remaining passengers. On the return trip, as the boat slowly calmed, Diana Albright sidled up to Eleanor. "Eleanor," she confided, her voice low, "this has been, without question, the most entertaining business weekend in years. Jonathan is absolutely delighted by its authenticity." She leaned in. "He just told me that woman has backbone. I like doing business with people who have backbone." Diana's gaze sharpened. "You know, Daniel married a woman very much like Jonathan's first wife. All flash, or appearances, no real substance beneath the veneer. That marriage, despite its grand beginnings, lasted exactly 3 years. The unspoken warning hung in the salty air." As they finally disembarked onto the blessed solidity of the pier, Daniel gave Eleanor a complex look, part exasperation, part admiration, and a profound new recognition of the woman she truly was. Charlotte, looking pale and disheveled, attempted to rally her diminished forces, muttering about hot showers and dry land. But Jonathan Albright, still invigorated, interrupted her. "All right, Charlotte, enough of this. I'm ready for that beach bonfire, Eleanor. And your chili, if it's half as good as my wife says it is." Diana enthusiastically agreed, a mischievous glint in her eye. Eleanor smiled, walking back to her cottage, the scent of salt and dampness clinging to her. She knew her lessons were being absorbed, not just by Daniel, but by the Albrights, the true arbiters of the weekend's success. Tonight's bonfire, she mused, would be the final test. The afternoon after the tumultuous whale watch brought a quiet calm to Eleanor's cottage. She spent the hours preparing for the evening's bonfire, chopping fresh vegetables for her chili, assembling an array of s'mores ingredients, and gathering blankets and cushions. There was a profound solace in these simple, practical tasks, a quiet centering after the day's strategic chaos. Daniel arrived alone, stepping onto the deck with a tentative knock. "Mom, can I help with anything?" His voice was softer, more unsure than she'd heard it in years. As they worked side by side, he ventured cautiously, "Mom, was all of this planned down to the last detail?" Eleanor paused, turning to him with a calm, steady gaze. "Yes, Daniel, it was." "Why?" The question was a whisper laced with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Wait," Eleanor echoed softly. "It was a lesson, sweetheart, a lesson in respect, in consequences." She chopped a carrot with deliberate precision. "Do you remember the beautiful old piano I had? The one my mother gave me? I loved that piano. It was the only thing I truly kept from my family home after I married Arthur. He sold it, without a single word to me, to pay for a new fishing boat he barely used. Said it was taking up too much space. Said my hobby wasn't practical." Her voice remained even, but the underlying pain was palpable. "That piano," she continued, "was a symbol of my desires, my passions being ignored, being trampled over for years. This cottage," she gestured around her, at the quiet, sun-drenched rooms, "this is my new piano, my hard-won dream, on my terms." And when Charlotte simply announced that 22 people were descending on it, without so much as a "by your leave," it felt like the piano all over again. Daniel absorbed this, his eyes fixed on hers. He suddenly understood the Albrights' admiration for Eleanor's authenticity, how they respected her quiet strength more than Charlotte's meticulous, yet inauthentic, planning. The truth resonated with a part of him he'd long suppressed. Authentic connection couldn't be scheduled or staged. It had to be earned, respected. He'd known that instinctively as a boy, before the pressures of his career and Charlotte's expectations had overshadowed it. By 6 p.m., a respectable bonfire crackled merrily on Eleanor's private beach. Driftwood logs, salvaged from the tide line, formed rustic seating, augmented by thick blankets. A sturdy wooden table, borrowed from Thomas Miller at Coastal Rentals, was laden with hot dogs, Eleanor's aromatic chili, fresh buns, and an inviting array of s'mores ingredients. The Albrights arrived first, dressed casually in sweaters and jeans, their faces alight with genuine appreciation for the rustic setting. "This is exactly what we needed," Jonathan declared, sinking onto a log. "No fuss, just good company and the sound of the ocean." Daniel's colleagues, now reduced to 3 couples, arrived next. They looked wary but wore an air of weary optimism, prepared for anything after the whale watch. Isabel Sterling and Marcus still showed a hint of discomfort at the casual, sand-covered seating, but their usual sharp edges seemed slightly blunted. Charlotte and Daniel were the last to join them. Charlotte displayed a facade of forced warmth and a tight smile. Her appropriate, yet clearly newly purchased, rustic chic attire a stark contrast to her earlier designer ensemble. Diana Albright, always perceptive, seamlessly included Eleanor in the conversation, asking about her plans for the cottage. Eleanor mentioned her dream of starting a summer community reading program on the beach, perhaps focusing on local history and maritime tales. Daniel, his face beaming with what Eleanor recognized as a rediscovered pride, chimed in, "Mom's always been amazing with stories. When I was little, she used to make up the best adventures." Charlotte, initially standing at the periphery, gradually edged closer to the fire, her expression shifting. The initial discomfort gave way to something more complex, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a reluctant recognition of a side of Eleanor she had never seen or never allowed herself to see. As night deepened and the stars began to pepper the inky sky, Eleanor, prompted by Jonathan, offered to tell a ghost story. Her voice, rich and resonant, wove a captivating tale of a lonely lighthousekeeper's daughter, lost to the sea but still searching for true love along the moonlit shore. The Albrights were utterly engrossed. Even Isabel and Marcus, the cynical crisis managers, leaned forward, captivated by the age-old magic of storytelling around a fire. Suddenly, Charlotte stood up. "I'm heading back to the house," she announced, her voice strained. "I need some quiet time." Daniel, ever solicitous, offered to walk her. "No," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "I'm perfectly fine." She stalked away, her silhouette disappearing into the darkness. Eleanor felt a momentary pang of something akin to sympathy for Charlotte's crumbling facade, but no regret. Jonathan Albright, unfazed, turned back to Eleanor. "Another story, Eleanor? Perhaps one about second chances?" Eleanor smiled, her gaze meeting Daniel's across the flickering flames. "Indeed, Jonathan," she began, her voice taking on a new resonance. "A tale about second chances and unexpected treasures found in the most unlikely places." She reflected that the weekend's purpose had been fulfilled. Messages had been received, boundaries established, perspectives shifted, and a new chapter, on her terms, was ready to begin. Morning arrived, crisp and clean, with a clear, sharp blue sky reflecting off the tranquil ocean. Eleanor, an early riser by nature and habit, brewed a pot of real coffee and settled onto her deck. The quiet solitude was a balm, the perfect start to a new day in her cherished home. A gentle creak of the screen door announced Charlotte's presence. She looked different this morning, vulnerable almost. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore plain jeans and a sweater, devoid of any pretense. "Eleanor," she began, her voice hesitant, "may I join you?" Eleanor, with a small smile, gestured to the empty chair beside her. Charlotte sank into it, wrapping her hands around a mug Eleanor offered. "I couldn't sleep," she confessed, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "I kept thinking about something Diana Albright said last night, about control being an illusion and authenticity being true power." She turned to Eleanor, her blue eyes, usually so sharp, now held a bewildered introspection. Did you plan this entire weekend? Everything?" Eleanor took a slow sip of her coffee. "Yes, Charlotte, I did." A beat of silence. Then, to Eleanor's surprise, Charlotte let out a soft, almost appreciative chuckle. "It was impressive, meticulous even." Her eyes met Eleanor's. "But why?" "My intent," Eleanor clarified, her voice calm and steady, "was to establish boundaries. To demonstrate that my home, my time, and my dignity are not commodities to be commanded or inconvenienced. They are to be respected." Charlotte nodded slowly. I I understand. My whole life I've been driven by a need for security. My parents, they lost everything when I was young. Financial struggles, loss of status. It scarred me. I vowed I would never feel that vulnerability again. So I chase control, I chase perfection, external markers of success. "Security is important, Charlotte," Eleanor acknowledged gently, "but true security comes from within, from knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will not compromise." She watched the ocean, then turned back to Charlotte. "You observed my journey, didn't you? My dream of this beach house, dismissed by Arthur. My beloved piano, sold without a thought. It wasn't just about the objects, it was about the disregard." Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "I worry about Daniel. He's becoming what others expect him to be. And you, Charlotte, you're chasing external markers that won't ever truly fulfill you. You're both losing sight of who you really are." Charlotte's gaze fell to her hands. "I don't even know how to be different anymore, Eleanor." "It's not that you don't know how," Eleanor replied softly. "It's who you've chosen to be. There's a difference, and choices can always be remade." Just then, Daniel emerged, looking much lighter than he had in days. He saw them, hesitated, then joined their small circle on the deck. The three of them sat in a rare, genuine quietude. Charlotte, breaking the silence, actually managed a hint of self-mockery. The Albrights want to have a final brunch, she announced, at that little place by the harbor. Jonathan said he particularly liked its authentic local atmosphere. At the Harbor View Cafe, Eleanor's old friend Maeve O'Connell, the owner, greeted her with a warm embrace. Eleanor, our local royalty, so good to see you with your family. Maeve's genuine warmth and the lively, unpretentious atmosphere of the cafe seemed to melt away the last vestiges of the guests' discomfort. Over coffee and fresh-baked pastries, the conversation flowed naturally, unforced. The Albrights, surprisingly, shared stories of their own humble beginnings, stories of hard work and tenacity that resonated deeply with Eleanor. Daniel, emboldened, spoke of his original literary passions, the authors and poets who had shaped him before law school. Charlotte, to Eleanor's quiet surprise, listened more than she spoke, truly listening. Jonathan Albright, after a comfortable silence, cleared his throat. Daniel, he said, we've decided we will indeed proceed with your proposal. However, we'd like to make some modifications. We want to emphasize a more community-centered focus, perhaps even integrating some local initiatives, much like Eleanor described with her reading program. He winked at Eleanor. Daniel looked stunned, a slow smile spreading across his face. He finally understood. Eleanor's authentic approach, her genuine connections, had swayed the Albrights far more than Charlotte's meticulously crafted strategy. Charlotte, beside him, remained thoughtful, her gaze flickering between Daniel and Eleanor. Later, as they walked back along the quiet coastal road, Charlotte finally spoke, her voice subdued. I've been approaching this all wrong, she admitted, almost to herself. I've missed what actually matters to people. You were right, Eleanor, about genuine connection. Daniel, his hand in his mother's, turned to her. Mom, I'm so sorry for taking you for granted, for letting things get this far. Charlotte, with visible difficulty, added, and I'm sorry, Eleanor, for treating your home and your feelings like an inconvenience, like they were just part of my plans. Eleanor smiled, a warm, genuine smile. Apology accepted. How about we start over, with honesty and with respect? And next time, Charlotte, she teased gently, maybe call first, and perhaps bring fewer than 22 people. The comment elicited a small, genuine laugh from Charlotte, a sound Eleanor hadn't thought possible from her own. Back at the cottage, Daniel helped Eleanor carry in some last-minute groceries. Arthur, he commented, shaking his head, would never have believed you were capable of all this. Charlotte, standing in the doorway, looked at Eleanor, a new glint in her eyes, a trace of admiration. You know exactly who you are now, don't you? Eleanor met her gaze, her smile serene. Yes, Charlotte, I do. Later that evening, as Eleanor settled back into her quiet routine, she found a framed photo on her pristine kitchen counter. It was a picture of her, younger, reading to a 5-year-old Daniel, his face rapt with attention. Tucked into the frame was a note in Daniel's familiar handwriting. To the woman who taught me the power of stories, boundaries, and second chances. I'm listening now. Eleanor placed the photo on her bedside table, a silent promise hanging in the air. She then settled back onto her deck with a book, The Sounds of the Ocean, a Lullaby. She was finally the author of her own life, contemplating not just her hard-won independence, but the unexpected possibility of reconciliation, a new, healthier chapter with her son and, perhaps, even her daughter-in-law. This story serves as a powerful reminder that every choice, every action carries a consequence, and that the quiet strength of an underestimated woman can move mountains. It's about finding your voice, setting boundaries, and sometimes simply orchestrating a memorable weekend to remind everyone what truly matters. Eleanor Vance, at 67, stood on her porch, the weight of her keys now a symbol not just of ownership, but of a quiet, hard-won victory. After years of being told a librarian's salary would never buy her a dream, after decades of patient saving and rebuilding her life post-divorce, her Cape Cod cottage was more than a house. It was a testament to her unwavering spirit, a modest but charming retreat that represented everything she had been told she would never achieve. When her ambitious daughter-in-law, Charlotte, inadvertently threatened this sanctuary with an uninvited invasion of 22 guests, Eleanor chose not to crumble, but to orchestrate a lesson. Leveraging her decades of library wisdom, the meticulous research, the understanding of human nature, The network of favors owed, Eleanor transformed a disrespectful demand into a series of unforgettable experiences. From separate, rustic accommodations to the deliberately challenging whale watch and the heartfelt bonfire, she peeled back Charlotte's carefully curated facade, forcing authenticity to the surface. Daniel rediscovered his mother's quiet strength, and even Charlotte began to see the true value of genuine connection over superficial appearances. Eleanor not only reclaimed her boundaries in her home, but also sparked a journey of self-discovery for those around her, proving that true power lies in quiet resolve and knowing exactly who you are.